thanks, Erin, for joining the podcast. We want to talk about the beginnings of GCCM. And you are a co-founder, one of the many co-founders. Take us back to that time then. There's rumblings about Laudato Si, or at least an encyclical by Pope Francis that's going to address this issue. What was kind of the environment like? Just the excitement around too? What was everything like at the time?
Well, thanks, Jonathan. It's great to be here. And it was a really exciting time. As you say, there were rumblings, there were rumors. I was in what I would call the eco-theologian world, also participating in environmental activism through different interfaith coalitions. And we would hear, Pope Francis might be writing an encyclical about the environment. And this was just hugely exciting news that really was a development from just the sheer fact that he chose the name Francis. I mean, that in itself was earth-shaking, exciting news. When I heard that our new Pope was choosing the name Francis, it just sent shivers through me that here we are having a new global leader who was reaching back to the memory and the legacy and the spirituality of Saint Francis. This was huge, that he wanted to embody that love of creation and love of the poor that had never been done before in the history of the church. So taking that first, really significant step of choosing the name Pope Francis meant so much. And then
So you
a couple
had, sorry to
years.
interrupt, you had a sense then. I mean, obviously the connotations are there, but you had a sense that this was leading maybe to a lot more, even when his papacy began.
Absolutely. It just resonated with great significance that he chose the name Francis, and brought up so much of the special charism of Saint Francis, his love of animals, his love of nature, his humility, his desire to renew the church, his attention to the poor, and his ability to see all of those relationships in a loving, cosmic vision of God's family. So that was really profound for me, and it really struck a chord. And then it was a couple years later that we started to hear, truly rumors from one person or another in the church. Oh, there might be an encyclical. And this was really, really significant because, I'd been uh, reading and writing and researching on the church's position on the environment for a while now, and the sources were scattered. You know, we had John Paul II's beautiful message for the um, message for the World Day of Peace, January 1st, 1990, which is a beautiful letter, and it contains the same themes and the same threads of care for creation as essential to care for human dignity, respect God's creation, and prevent the degradation of the earth and the suffering of the poor. But it's a very short document and it's little known. There are other messages for sure, and the Holy See has participated in UN conferences for a long time. But again, this is certainly not widely known in the church. And so that's something that always concerned me and gave me a lot of question. Why is it that an issue as important as climate change, as urgent and critical, and as destructive for so many people, is not getting the attention it deserves? Our church is right out front with care for the poor, with global ministry to refugees, to homeless, to the hungry. And yet climate change is worsening all these issues, and it's not being lifted up. The place where it was being attended to was in local bishops' conferences, local grassroots bishops' conferences around the world, where the bishops were attending to crises in their own regions, were resulting in pastoral letters. And many of these were collected in a very useful document called "And God Saw That It Was Good." And this was one of the important collections, letting us see what bishops in the Philippines, what bishops in South America were seeing in their own regions about climate change. But to have a papal encyclical with this message coming from the top, an entire encyclical devoted to the cause of environmental care, integrated with the cry of the poor, was just an enormous message of the significance of this for the entire church, of the significance of care for creation for every person. And just an amazing gift to all of us doing this work and learning so much from Francis's vision.
And just to fill people in, what exactly were you doing at the time?
Well, I'm a theologian, and at the time I was teaching as a professor at the College of St. Elizabeth in Morristown, New Jersey. And I would do my research in two main areas. One is the faith-based environmental movement itself. What supports the faith-based environmental movement? What holds it back? What are the factors that inspire people? What are the factors that prevent their engagement from being successful? So that was one stream of my research that resulted in my book, Inspired Sustainability, Planting Seeds for Action. And in that, I looked at a lot of issues like scientific literacy, like climate psychology. There are so many ways that the information we receive can either inspire us to take action or thwart our action, simply because of the way our brains are structured and habituated to filter out messages or encourage us to take action. So I looked at a lot of things like that, and I interviewed dozens and dozens of faith-based environmentalists to see what made them successful in their congregations. That was one stream of my research. Another was energy ethics, and looking at what ways our energy decisions have impacts on others. You know, looking at the ways that energy decisions are ethical decisions, because energy is clearly one of the most consequential factors in our society and the major cause of greenhouse gases. So I was interested in integrating Catholic social teaching and an analysis of energy sources.
Both very fascinating areas to dive into. And of course, you were kind of clamoring for this encyclical then. As you said, the research was scattered kind of throughout, here and there. So then, just before the encyclical comes out, of course, GCCM, Global Catholic Climate Movement, is formed, not just before, but before. And then walk us through kind of that year, that first kind of rush of, the Philippine visit, the encyclical does come out, and then that early momentum, and then we can and just take us from there, kind of that first initial rush of, I guess, the expectation, just to frame it a little better, kind of what were the expectations? And the encyclical comes out, the movement is formed. What were you kind of thinking would come of this, and what the next steps were?
Well, I was thrilled beyond words that we had this massive, weighty, profound document added to the body of Catholic social teaching. it is just a permanent part of our intellectual tradition. Um, it expands it in numerous ways. It includes the entire circle of life in its attention and integrates it with the traditional themes of Catholic social teaching, and calls on every living person to make care for creation part of their Christian responsibility that is neither secondary nor optional. So it's very clear, and it critiques our culture in important ways that we need to hear, in terms of the throwaway culture, the culture of consumerism, the technocratic paradigm. I mean, it's so rich with intellectual analysis and insights. So that was a major gift. However, it was also a strategic gift because of the timing of the release of the encyclical in advance of Paris, in advance of the UN meetings to discuss the Sustainable Development Goals, and in advance of Pope Francis's visit to the United States to meet with the US Congress and hopefully influence them because of the important role of the United States geopolitically. So the timing of this encyclical was very savvy and enabled the document to be a major player on the world stage. It was so well received by environmentalists and negotiators globally, and it was warmly embraced by interfaith environmental activists. There were so many documents by rabbis welcoming and celebrating Laudato Si, by imams welcoming and celebrating Laudato Si. Everyone was delighted to see this this testament to the need to care for creation coming from one of the world's major moral and religious figures, who has a unique authority. You know, the Pope has a unique authority, and he really brought it to bear upon this issue. So the contribution to our Catholic social teaching, the moral message to the entire world, and the timing from a geopolitical point of view was tremendous and tremendously exciting. So hearing that a group of people was gathering to collect signatures and to amplify the voice of this encyclical was just a brilliant idea, and it took off and spread around the world. And I remember that I was on my way to a conference, and was this was my first notification of GCCM. I was invited to share to sign a document in support of this nascent organization, which I was delighted to do, and that accounts for my recognition as a co-founder. I was not
It
one of the
sounds like a
people.
modest recognition on your part, but we'll allow it. Keep going.
Yeah, no, I was not one of the people on those Tuesday morning dawn calls. I didn't have a role in that. But what I did do is, once the document was published, is begin to spread knowledge about it as best I could. And in my role as a theologian, that meant lectures that were lectures and panels that were taking place all over the country. Many people wanted to learn more about the encyclical. And so I went to Catholic universities, some secular universities, but for the most part, Catholic universities that wanted to learn more. And I would speak about the encyclical and give presentations on it. And I have to say, my very first one was a radio conversation at America Magazine the day that the encyclical came out. And because of that, I was given an advance copy. So I got to read it 2 days before it was actually published. And I just received my copy and started to read it and started to cry, because those opening 2 paragraphs are so powerful and so moving, as Pope Francis writes about Sister Earth, who is wounded because of our sins, and yet is a beautiful sister, a beautiful mother who cares for us. So it was a very moving experience. And shortly after that America Magazine radio podcast, I did a short interview with Katie Couric on Yahoo News. And there was just so much excitement, and the encyclical was in the air. And that whole year, I spent lecturing about Laudato Si. So it was for sure the year to share the wonderful gift of this encyclical.
For sure. What, just to go back a bit, what were you feeling then when you read those two paragraphs? Like, I mean, you get your copy, you're looking at it, and then you start to read, and then take us back to that moment.
It was really profound because the earth has been so neglected so often, forgotten, taken for granted. And as a woman and as a feminist scholar, the earth has often been aligned with women as, a resource to be exploited and mistreated. And the earth's resources have been terribly misused, carelessly plundered, uh, just used in toxic and polluting and harmful ways with little care for those affected by it. And feminist theologians have often attended to this connection between the earth and women as, underappreciated resources, to say the least. And so, especially the way Pope Francis lifted up and honored Sister Earth as a loving mother, as a beautiful sister with whom we share our lives. It was such a healing moment, such a beautiful and loving way to honor and revere Sister Earth, and to call her forward as worthy and needing all of our healing and care. So it was a really profound moment for me to read those first paragraphs.
Yeah, very powerful. Thank you for sharing more. Did you think, getting back to Global Catholic Climate Movement, did you think the movement would grow as it has? Did you think it would grow more, less? I mean, now hundreds of thousands of Catholics and people of all faith participate. What were your thoughts at the time?
Yeah, I had no idea it would grow as it has. It's just astounding to see the size of the movement, the reach of the movement, its growth over the entire globe, its presence among young people, older people, families, children, parishes, and spread by the magic of the internet. I mean, it has local presences with grassroots communities, but for the most part has been powered by this incredible ability of people to connect through the magic of technology that we now have. So no, I did not expect it to grow and grow roots and spread as it has. And I think that there's several factors for that success, and a really important one is the deep spirituality of GCCM. It has always put prayer and eco-conversion and contemplation first. It is a organization with bold goals for advocacy and lifestyle change, but these have always been accompanied by prayer, by invitations to monthly prayer, by sharing of prayer petitions, of resources for masses, and for prayers for groups. And I really think that has been part of its success as an organization that's deepened its identity within the church.
Yeah, true spirit-led movement. Now, of course, we're kind of reflecting because it's a time of change for GCCM, now known as Laudato Si Movement. A big hooray for that. I'll do the claps on when you see the video, if you see the video. Um, Very exciting times, of course, for a number of reasons, but I guess overall, and now you're a part of the Laudato Si Movement staff. Of course, have always been a part of GCCM slash Laudato Si Movement. But what do you think of the synodal discernment process and kind of what can lie ahead for the global movement and just the name change overall, how it all encompasses so much as well?
Well, I think that the name change points to the centrality of eco conversion, that what's at the heart of our movement is a renewal of church life to focus on the care for the poor and the care for the earth, as central to Christian discipleship. And so we're rooted in the call to praise God, Laudato Si, praised be, in harmony with all the creatures, for the sake of a more sustainable, flourishing, just society. And it's not just about um, achieving technological change to remedy the climate crisis. It's about a renewal of our ways of life so that we are living in balance, with all of God's creation. And so that eco conversion is at the center. And that is a movement of praise, of humility, and of recognizing who we truly are. We are God's creatures, and we're part of the family of God's creatures. And we need to return our lifestyles to um, one that's in balance. And we need to, it's beautiful to see ourselves as a renewal movement in the church that is led by the Spirit to place care for creation at the center of what we do, because we are living in a crisis time where clearly things have gone very wrong. And it's time for that renewal. And these renewals have happened throughout church history. There's precedent for it. It's part of why our church has endured for over 2,000 years, because the Spirit guides the church to a new life when needed. And we're in a very exciting phase right now where that's happening, and people are seeing it, and they're feeling that call within themselves. They're perceiving that vocation. And we're all joining together, led by Laudato Si as our charter. And I think that for that reason, the new name it highlights that spiritual mission at the core of what we do.
What is another renewal that maybe your favorite through, I mean, knowing the church history and of course being a theologian, what's another renewal that has taken place throughout the church that comes to mind, or just to give people kind of another example of the times we're potentially living through?
Well, I think the monastic renewal that Saint Benedict began when he created uh, monastic life in community instead of monastic life in hermitages. He really invented the notion of community monastic life, where people had shared work, shared prayer, shared recreation, attended to each other's needs, and lived in community. So that was one important renewal, and it's just foundational for Western Christianity. And then the renewals of St. Dominic and St. Francis, who were moved to care for the urban poor. You could put St. Vincent in this category as well. He was really called to renew the clergy, who at that time in France were a rather privileged and isolated group, not very attentive to the pastoral and material needs of their flocks. And he really renewed the clergy to care for the poor, and he organized lay people to join him in that work. So I think those are examples of times when the church said, we're not quite caring for those in need the way we should. And someone came along with a deep attentiveness to it and the charismatic ability to bring others to follow, and renew that and find a new way to take care of people better.
Like a slight course change, veering one way or the other. So
Yes,
fantastic, Erin. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. It was lovely to chat. We'll have to do this again. Thank you so much.
sounds good. Good talking with you, Jonathan.